Hi, this is MarqueeCReW, and I would like to demonstrate to you my Hello World Alteryx / Rube Goldberg edition macro. I am not submitting this to the invention contraption contest that is available out there if you go to rubegoldberg.com, but I wanted to show you something that might have some training opportunities for you, learning opportunities for you in the creation of a hello world function that is a macro that creates just that string hello world. So the macro requires no configuration and it will output hello world. But in the spirit of Rube Goldberg, I add a little bit of functionality that might not be necessary, but I can add a text input to that, and I can put in there hello world, and it will still output hello world. In fact, it's a optional connector here. I could change hello world to this is Marquee, whoops, gotta spell my name right, Crew. And if I do that, it will output not hello world, but it will output whatever it was conditionally put in. It actually does something in the macro, and I'm going to show you the building of this macro and what it does. I'm going to open the macro, and just like a Rube Goldberg contraption, you will see that there is lots beneath the covers here as to what it's going to do. So let's hit run so I can see the text of hello world running through the process. There's the optional input here, which as we can see has optional incoming connections, and what will happen is whatever data comes in will come into a union with the static hello world, and it will auto configure by position, and it will take the second data, which is this input first, and it will then sample out the first record in case, as this case has, there's two sets of data. So now I've gotten the first set of data, about as complicated as I can get it, coming through, and it's saying hello world. Now I want to parse that hello world out into each character. Why, I don't know, but it sounded like something fun to do, so I created a regular expression tool here to break it up, and it breaks it up into rows for every character. This is something that you might want to do. If you're designing a VIN decoder, you might need this exact functionality. And I've got visible ASCII characters here. Everything from space to tilde is there. And so now I know what the potential values are that I might be seeing in an ASCII character set for the text. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into an iterative macro. Why an iterative macro? Because I wanted to create an iterative macro and a batch macro to use inside of this standard macro. And what it's going to do is it's going to add a record ID to the input. And that input, again, looks like one letter at a time vertically. And what we're going to do is we're going to read in the character set, and we're going to take one page out of that listing of lines or records that are given to us for the character set. And we're going to see, does it match? And if it matches, it puts the data to the found output. Every page that I bring in, I'm now going to iterate and bring through repeatedly. I checked the first record, the second record, the third record, until I have no more pages of or rows in my character set. And I'm creating a iteration loop to look one record at a time. Why am I looking one record at a time? Just for fun. But if this had been something like a airline listing, and I wanted to see where all the flights were going, it could go and work that way as well. I could have taken the data from the right join, but I decided to do two joins because it's a Rube Goldberg contraption. So what happens when I come through this macro is I end up with hello world in ASCII order. So that record ID that I've got here tells me what the original order was, and now I want to get the data into the correct order. So I'm going to have a select after that to make sure that my record IDs are set as numbers, and I'm going to divide that record ID into 1. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to take the biggest numbers and make them the smallest, and the smallest numbers make them the biggest. Again, that's a Rube Goldberg approach to creating a sort descending. Now, instead of using a sort tool, which I think you might recognize would have been the proper tool to use, I'm using a tile tool. And the tile tool, naturally, when the sort method is invoked, and in this case I used Unicode just for fun, it's going to take that record ID field and it's going to sort it in descending order. So I needed my smallest numbers first. And what happens when I then come out of the tile tool is I'm now seeing hello world in the original sort order. Now, having gotten this far, I'm going to get rid of the columns that aren't of value, which includes those fine record IDs, and get ready to turn this vertical value into a horizontal string. How do I do that? Well, it would be rather straightforward if I just used a summarize tool, and for the functions, I could have taken a string function, and I'm selecting values that aren't strings, and I can concatenate them together and build out the string. But again, Rube Goldberg contraption wouldn't allow me to do something straightforward. But I'm going to show you how I can dynamically calculate what is the string. And so what I've done is I'm going to now reverse this minimum and maximum record ID by dividing it again into 1 and getting the numbers 1 and 13. And I'm going to use a generate rows tool to be able to say, I want each of the values of 1 through 13, and I'm applying that back to the original data, which was hello world. And so I now again have hello world, but I have the row count on each of these being assigned to each of these letters. And I'm going to take that and cross-tab it and create hello world. Now I would like to smash all of these contents into a single field. Well, imagine that what you've got here is month 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and you wanted to put a total column at the end. The same type of approach could be used here, and that every month you get potentially more and more columns to add. So instead of transposing the data, what I decided to do was take that list of rows and use a multi-row formula to generate a formula that looks like a real formula in Alteryx. And I basically add the brackets around it and a plus sign. Now I'm going to go and limit myself to the last record. And here's my formula that I would like to go and create and apply it in Alteryx. But it has an extra plus sign at the end of it. So I've got a formula tool which has a most ridiculous regular expression that looks for things that are not control characters, that are many of them, that are followed by a non-word character, and replaces it with those non-control characters. And essentially, that will just zap that last plus sign away from you. If I join this data together with the original data through an append tool, then what I will end up with is a formula that I want to apply to this long string. That's where a batch macro comes in. So at this point, I'm going to open up my batch macro. I hope you're following along. And I'm going to take that control parameter and say, hey, if the count of the plus signs is equal to 12, then I want to come up and use this formula. If it's 13, I want to use this formula. Now, this formula here looks like it's just saying hello world. But actually what it's doing is it's replacing hello world with that formula that you saw, which was 1 plus 2 plus 3, etc. And if the formula was more than 12 plus signs or less than 12 plus signs, it would come in here and it would replace this formula. So what's actually going to happen, it doesn't really matter what you see here, it's going to get replaced with the right number of fields and plus signs, and it will come out dynamically now as the new formula. So again, if I had a lot of data here and I wanted to add a total column, I would have to either hard code it, which I would not do, or I would transpose the data and turn it vertical, which is a costly exercise, even for a Rube Goldberg example. And so when it comes out of this macro, it will then take hello world and it will create the new string of hello world. One of the things that you do inside of a macro is you take only the data that you need through the macro and then you append it to your original data. So in that line, I put a join tool to do that with, but I threw away all of my data. So this is not something you need in the macro, but it's a good practice to do. And at the end of the day, it will come out with hello world. You may have to watch this more than once to get the nuances and all the extra little Easter eggs that are inside of this one workflow. The workflow is available on Gallery. That's at Alteryx Community, and I'll put a post to that inside of the link about the information about this macro. Hopefully you enjoyed the route that I went through to say hello world, and maybe you can come up with your own obscure invention. Cheers.